Nature is a broad concept, and it's surprisingly hard to pinpoint a clear and consistent definition of what it means in an economic context. If we take the best bits of various leading frameworks, we think it's most clearly described as plants, animals, how they interact with each other and with their ecosystems that yields a flow of benefits to society. So, things like fresh water for drinking, soil to sustain crops, the pollination of those crops by bees, the metals and minerals used to make the machinery that harvests the crops, these are all encompassed in how we should think about nature from a business context.
Every business has an effect on nature somewhere in its value chain, and similarly, every business relies on nature. These are called impacts and dependencies. Depending on the scale, scope, and severity, some of these impacts may affect the way in which nature can support society. These impacts and dependencies may also manifest as financial risks and opportunities in a business. The financial sector mirrors the real economy, and so needs to consider its own nature-based risks, opportunities, and dependencies, but also those of the companies that it invests in and lends to.
Globally, we're making strides to better understand nature-related impacts, risks, and opportunities. In the last year and a half, several milestones have been reached. The 15th session of the Conference of the Parties, held in 2022 and otherwise known as COP15, delivered a global biodiversity framework aimed at addressing biodiversity loss and restoring natural ecosystems. This was endorsed by the UK and 188 other governments worldwide, obliging them to protect 30% of the planet by 2030 and committing businesses to assessing, disclosing and reducing biodiversity-related risk and negative impacts, among other measures. Then, in June 2023, the IFRS introduced Global Sustainability Reporting Standards. IFRS S1 covers general requirements for disclosure of sustainability-related financial information, and IFRS S2 covers specific climate disclosures. Although nature is not explicitly called out in a standard of its own, it will need to be assessed as part of the financial materiality requirements within S1. Following that, in September 2023, Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, referred to as TNFD, developed and launched a framework for reporting nature-related risks and opportunities. And lastly, the European CSRD requirements came into effect from January 2024. This applies to companies operating in the European Union, and it requires them to consider nature-related topics as part of a robust double materiality assessment.
If you have major operations in Europe and are subject to ESRS and CSRD legislation, you have additional work to do now. Alongside climate and social topics, you will need to consider nature, risks, opportunities, impacts and dependencies, specifically as part of a double materiality assessment. UK-endorsed IFRS sustainability standards are due to be released in Q1 2025. Although they will not contain any nature-specific disclosure legislation, they will require companies to assess whether or not nature is considered a financially material issue. And to make that assessment requires a level of understanding of the company's impact on nature. Timelines for compliance are yet to be announced, and so for the moment, any nature-based assessments are voluntary in the UK, other than for those related to biodiversity net gain.
Putting compliance to one side, we think there are 3 steps every company should try and take this year. Why? Because it makes good commercial sense. Why now? Because the tools and frameworks are there that means that you can do it efficiently. The first thing to do is to map your value chain, your supply chain, your operations and downstream activities, and note where in that chain there are impacts or dependencies on nature. Next, you need a way of trying to assess how big and how significant those impacts and dependencies are. And you can use a simple 1 to 5 scoring system as you think about the scale, the scope, and the severity of those impacts. And that allows you to start to quantify their importance. Next, you can consider whether any of those impacts and dependencies lead to financial risks or opportunities for your business, and how significant those might be in terms of, for example, costs incurred, revenues at risk, or your ability to access capital. The most effective way to do all of this is as part of a broader double materiality assessment that specifically incorporates nature. This forms the basis of CSRD reporting in Europe, and we think is simply good practice.
Pragmatism is key here. Taking some steps to understand your nature-based risks, opportunities, and dependencies will be a huge step forward. It will provide you with a strong evidence base and foundations upon which to build a sensible and practical plan, one that is right-sized for your organization and demonstrates the extent to which your organization interacts with nature. The most well-developed UK banks spent 2023 beginning to understand how they interact with nature and building awareness internally and at board level. They'll build on that incrementally this year. They're not rushing into things, and they're taking practical and pragmatic steps so they build towards target setting and disclosure in future years. As more tools are developed to help quantify and model nature impact, and as the bar of sustainability disclosure rises further, things may of course accelerate. But for now, don't let perfect be the enemy of progress. Get prepared, be pragmatic, and of course, speak to us at Peregrine if you want a partner that can help.